Reverend David picked that song out for this talk. It's just so perfect. The title is The Eternal Soul. This year we've focused our talks around this book, Creating a World That Works for All by Sharif Abdullah. There's still a number of copies in the bookstore if you're interested. I find it to be an incredible book. And I was looking through it the other day, and on page 153 he wrote, "Each of us is perfectly poised to fulfill our moment of destiny. The circumstances of our birth, our life experience, our education, emotional traumas are all the raw materials of a larger, mysterious providence." Well, I looked up providence. Providence means divine care. Divine care. So are you open to what he's saying? Are you really open that each of you is perfectly poised to fulfill your moment of destiny? And he means in this lifetime. Amen. Thank you. And that the circumstances in your life experience are the raw materials for a larger expression of divine care about you. That's the good news. So add to that each of us is an eternal soul, and we've got a lot to do in this lifetime. I'm tired. No. So this morning I want to add some perspective to this. And the first thing I want to do is talk about some definitions of soul, spirit, and mind, and then why we find ourselves here on the cusp of 2017. So what is the soul? Well, in The Science of Mind Philosophy, our textbook written by Dr. Ernest Holmes, he says the soul is the creative medium of spirit. It's the mirror of our mind. It reflects our deepest thoughts. And it's subjective. Subjective means it's below consciousness. So the subjective mind is we're not conscious of what's in there, but we've been pumping it full of our thoughts and our beliefs, etc. So it operates below consciousness, but it takes those thoughts and it takes action on it. It doesn't say, well, that was a stupid thought. It just says, hey, that's what they're focused on. It can't analyze or reject. It can only carry out the orders that we're giving it. Did you ever hear the words, energy flows where our attention goes? That's what this means. Where we put our energy, where we put our thoughts, where we put our emotions, that's where the energy goes. And our soul says, okay, we got it. More of that. So what is spirit? Spirit is God. Now, you may not like the word God, but you could use Big Sweetie instead. You could use all kinds of words. I like infinite intelligence. It's kind of not real cozy feeling, but that's just me. But it's also the conscious universe, the big universe, what we call the absolute, the big A absolute. But we're spirit on an individual level. So it's not that we're in this room all one spirit. We're individual spirits, but we're encompassed in the big absolute picture. And that gives us the freedom to choose. We have a lot of freedom in this life. But that means we also have the opportunity to know ourselves at a deep spiritual level. So spirit is the only power in the universe that knows itself. Now, if you don't know who you are, think about this. But I'm sure everyone in here knows who they are, and you can contemplate that and think about it. So that's why you are also not just a soul, but a spirit. So what is mind? Have you ever seen one? No. The only proof we have of mind is that we can think. We can think, we can analyze. So there's no such thing, though, as my mind, your mind, and God's mind, all this separation. There's one mind in which we think. That's why through intuition and deep spiritual contemplation, we can seemingly pull out of nowhere a thought or an inspiration that wasn't there before, because we're all part of this big one mind. But mind is potential energy. It's also called what I like to call pure potentiality. Because if it's all universal, I don't know if you've ever sat down one at any time and said, I really need to know more about what to do about this, and this big thought comes out of the spear, out of it, who knows where it comes from. It's like, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. It was pure potential all the time. And all we had to do is contemplate it, think about it, invite it in. So it's our mind plus our thought and feelings that uses this pure potentiality to create action in our lives. So I hope you like what you're seeing. Well, if God's mind is eternal, and we're an eternal soul, and God's mind is perfect, and God is happy, and God's satisfied, well, then why are we here? Why did you have to create millions of other beings if you were so satisfied? Sounds like a good question, doesn't it? But Holmes answers it, and he said, God would not be fully expressed if we weren't here as independent thinkers. He uses the word, God would have no independent offspring. Now that kind of rubbed me up the wrong way. But then I thought, well, think about you as parents. You have this child, you raise this child to be an independent offspring. That's the way this thing we call Big Sweetie does. Creates this soul, this being, this spirit to be independent in thinking. So perhaps you haven't heard that before, but I think it's interesting that we give expression to God, and this is the greatest truth that's been revealed. That's why we consciously can work out our own destiny here on earth. We determine our good. And you know what? No matter how we determine it, God says, pretty good job. Pretty good. Because like the universe continues to expand and grow and evolve, we do too. Now, I like to think that we learn to evolve and grow and not just expand on the hips, I thought that's too funny for God that I'm continuing to expand. But from God's point of view, it's like watching a baby that's thinking about crawling and then starts to crawl and then eventually walks. And what do? We don't say, oh, bad boy, you fell down. We say, get up, come on, it's okay, good boy, good girl, good girl. We cheer them on every step of the way, and eventually they learn to run. So here we are, about to enter Humanity 2017. It's almost like you're opening a new chapter in a book. We don't know what's there yet. But we look around, and some cultures in the world are thinking about crawling. Some are crawling, some are standing, some are teetering a little bit as they walk. Others are walking pretty good. But then there's this minority, and I like to think that many of us here in this philosophy are in this minority that knows that we can run into a world without war. We can run into a world without violence. We can run into a world where everyone is respected. We know that. But then sometimes we get a little arrogant and we go, you don't have to crawl, just get up and run. But don't fall down. Don't trip anybody else up. We get a little impatient. And that's the humor for God. I gave you eons to evolve, and now you want the rest of the world to catch up tomorrow. So in 2017, we need to just calm down a little bit. I think we just need to calm down because this creation thing goes on forever. Our soul and spirit are in this for the long run, which is called eternity. Energy in its formless state is pure potentiality. But energy in a formless state is not static. It responds to our spirit, and we're always giving birth to form. Now, you sweet people that picked up the teddy bears, did you know you were going to hold a teddy bear this morning? I thought it was so sweet. But that's the beauty of all of this. Our heart was called to pick these beautiful teddy bears up. So when we use this law of independence and we use this law of cause and effect, we can create greater freedom for ourselves and greater joy. But Holmes warns us of one thing. We're not going to achieve this ultimate, beautiful reality if we are still judging based on appearances. It's important that we do not judge based on appearances, because it contradicts oneness. It contradicts love. So I invite you to take non-judgment and make that the keystone of your New Year's resolution, because it's so important to the future. And because there's always an enemy lurking around that Holmes calls fear. Fear is the opposite of faith. Now, we all have faith, but if we have fear, recently, we are inviting lack and limitation. We're inviting it by grabbing onto this fear. Fear is denial that God is at the center of all. Fear is denial that God is the source of all. So fear is really big. It has a big energy about it. Now, in our media-hyped culture, there's so much negativity, and it's really hard to figure out, is this the truth? Is this a radical idea? Or now we're finding there's fake news out there? Are we getting fearful based on fake news? That blows my mind. So the will of Spirit is peace, clear thinking and happiness, and it has no other will, otherwise it would have self-destructed eons ago. So what do we know? We've been blessed with a soul, we're a spirit, we're evolving at our own pace and the pace of our communities. We contribute to the conditions in our lives by our thoughts. We live in a universe that is alive, conscious, awake. It operates through love and law. And so I challenge you to see life as divine and see it unfolding perfectly according to the evolution of consciousness within yourself, but also your community. And choose to pay attention to your thoughts and your words. Are you contributing to a greater peace, or are you undermining it? Gulp. Are we undermining it sincerely? Which brings me to what I think is the number one important word for 2017, and that is mender, M-E-N-D-E-R. In Sharif's book, he says there are 3 stories throughout humanity. The one is the keepers, the indigenous people who lived in most of the world, and as the world expanded, the indigenous peoples are fewer, but there are still some who live based on their ecosystem, based on working with each other. And then came the breakers. The breakers go, man, this is all ours. We're separate from nature. We can do whatever we want. There's not enough, and we're going to take more and take more and take more. But they did it in all aspects of life, through the military, through the political system, through the economic system, through the ecological and scientific methods. Sharif believes that breakers have been blind to the realities of the connectedness of all, and that they've had this I am separate consciousness. And he said that I am separate consciousness is part of the problems everywhere you look in the world. So he came up with the word mender. It's an emerging story, obviously. There are people who choose to live as conscious inhabitants on the earth and to be conscious of what we're doing, not just for ourselves, but for future generations and for the earth itself. But he said the menders are evolving slowly, and they're catalysts for the future. And he thinks that most of us would like to be a mender. But he said, calm down. You're a breaker in recovery. And I agree. We do not say you're at fault, but we're a little slow to pick up on the idea that we were all part of that. That we're all part of that. Because the breaker story is not all negative. Think of the scientific achievements we've had. Think of the medicine, the way the whole medical field is now. There used to be a lifespan of 45, 50 years, and now we're well over 80. That's incredible. It took a breaker consciousness to do it, but now we don't have to support that totally anymore. Because the breaker consciousness had a lack of understanding about the web of life, about the evolution of the web of life. And they also had a lack of understanding about the relationships of people and community and their spiritual identities. And they also had a lack of understanding about unintended consequences, especially when it comes to war. You know, in 1976, I was attending the Ohio State University. The Buckeyes won yesterday in double overtime. In case you missed that, it was a great game. But I had to take the first class they ever gave on ecology, Ecology 101, 1976. That's 40 years ago, the first class in ecology given at Ohio State University. I passed. But it was an evolution in consciousness. I saved that textbook for years because I thought, holy cow, I didn't know this. And then I had to take biology, which I tried to get out of so much, and learned how a garden really grows. It's not really magic. And so my innocence was broken, and I resented it a little bit. But I also was appreciative that I was learning more. So there's been this explosion of interest in the web of life, how I'm connected to you, how the energy of the earth is connected to all of us, and how we can intuitively feel what's really going on. But Sharif says it's going to take 1,000 years to fix what we already broke. Now, I believe that because our behavior is not in line with the needs of the earth. And it's going to take a long time, but we don't need to beat ourselves up about it. I was going 1,000 years divided by 80, how many generations is that going to take? So tomorrow, I do not have to beat myself up and say, can I save the world today? Or how am I? Sometimes it's just good enough to save myself. So he reminds us that the Menders movement is not mature, and it will not mature as long as we are not able to transmit our experience and our society to other societies through language. That baffled me. I was just like, what? We're doing all this good here in this country, but he says, unless we can transmit that in language to other societies and other cultures, we're not going to get where we want to go. So I read also that part of the problem with terrorists is they do not know how to absorb love. Wow, that was a big one for me. It's hard to wrap my mind around a person that does not know how to absorb love. So how can we develop a language to transmit our experience in our society to the degree that a terrorist would not want to blow us up? Now that's big work. That's big work. And many of the world conditions today have a lot to do with culture. Some people think their culture is normal. Stoning, killing, mutilating, oppressing people, they think that's normal. But the other problem is the people within that culture are afraid to break out of it, so they reinforce it. And it becomes very hard to break that culture. That's why he said language is going to be so important, to convey to others what love is, what respect is, what doing good is. And so Sharif says this new consciousness is going to require big changes. Very, very big adjustments. But I know you're up for it, contributing to it anyway. And that is to live life inclusively, to know that there's a positive role for every person in the universe. Every person, there's a positive role to be led. And to be authentic. Live your life based on your values. We did a values assessment in class the other day, and they were all over the board. But values grow in us over time. Are we living according to our values? And I would say if we value openness, honesty, dignity, love, honor, respect, we would recognize when we are living in fear and judging others. And he said it's important to be spiritually inclined because we can then demonstrate transcendent values, more deeply held spiritual values. And then we have to say life is scapegoat-free, no one to blame. No one to blame. And then life has to be sustainable. So those are major, major adjustments that the world will be making the more the menders are raising up in society and speaking up. Especially speaking up. This language is really important. To achieve this just in the Reading community would be phenomenal. But it doesn't matter whether our generation or the next fixes all the problems because it's going to take 1,000 years. In 2017, though, there's a lot you can do. You can awaken within yourself areas where you're able to help others feel love. Our donations to People of Progress, food banks, the Hope Van, teddy bears for children. And the teddy bears will not only go to the police for Christmas to hand out, but they told me that they carry them around in their police cars because they often go to domestic violence cases, and it's the best way to help a child that's embroiled in domestic violence. So they carry them all year round. So then we can act in the world as if we're part of it, and that would be part of it instead of separate from it, just watching it happen. And then just be very conscious of our faithfulness to our values. And this protects our precious eternal soul. So we've come full circle this morning. And I'd like to wrap that up with a prayer. This oneness we feel this morning, remembering it, just remembering that we're all in this together. That we're uplifting our soul, uplifting our spirit, uplifting each other. When we see in the distance that we can contribute to a world without violence, without war, with respect for each other. And in 2017, what a great time to begin that march. What a great time to give more of ourselves into those areas that really change lives, including our own, and to help each other when we stumble, to help each other when we get fearful and we forget. Big Sweetie's always there, loving us up, just like we're loving up these bears. So Ernest Holmes, I am so grateful for your teaching, for this philosophy, for this truth that we can live with greater conviction, knowing all is good from God's point of view. We're doing good, and there's more to be done. So we accept this way of being in life in 2017 and beyond, knowing it is the perfect way to unfold the goal of our soul, which is pure love. In gratitude, I release these words to you, to all of you, to Spirit, knowing they are so, and I accept them for myself and for you right now. And so it is. Thank you.